Hello everyone, and welcome back to SCP Cafe. This is part 2 of the Week 52 recap for 2018. I was wondering why this recap was taking so long, having only 10 skips to review. It turns out the problem is I cannot count. We have 11 to review, so we covered 5 in part 1, which hopefully if you're listening to this, you've already caught up on part 1. If not, it is available on scp.cafe. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and however else you receive podcasts. So if you're still with me, I'm going to assume you are all caught up, and we can proceed on to SCP-4031. This is currently plus 28 in 2 days. It has an object class of Euclid, and before we get to the skip itself, we have a little header above it that says, the following file was found in Site 82. It's an interesting addition at the very top level like this. It, by all accounts, should still be an active skip. So let's see what we have to make necessary such a note at the beginning. We have a threat level of unknown and special containment procedures of not applicable. Very interesting format screw to start us off. The description is 3 sentences or so. It's a powerful, fast-acting amnesiac of unknown makeup, quantity, and origin, and that subjects in the visual, olfactory, gustatory, auditory, tactile, and mimetic range sustain short-term memory loss, dissociation, and an acidic aftertaste. Application of the amnesiac leads to a vocalization of male human origin. Exposed subjects cannot corroborate the vocalization's existence upon interrogation. Kind of a strange sentence. I want to see where they go with this. We have an experimentation log that says that the series of alleged interactions with SCP-4031, interactions were not logged in real time. Unknown subjects recorded the interactions in documentation areas. Inputs include different persons, objects, and conceptual structures. Results include different levels of conceptual recall. And what we have following is a table with 2 columns. One column is labeled input, the other column is labeled result. And it's a familiar looking sort of format. We have, for example, at the top line, we have input is D5547, and I'm assuming a D class. The result is forgotten. And then the next line we have recall of D5547. The result is not applicable. We go through these things where things are forgotten and expire, and we have basically more and more of a de-evolution of the input from, for example, strawberry rhubarb pie is forgotten. Pie is not applicable. A gustatory sensation, which would be a taste, is not applicable. Tongue is forgotten. Fleshy structure of unknown origin is consumed. Fleshy structure of unknown origin is not applicable. Blood loss forgotten. Blood loss not applicable. Blood not applicable. Blood, subject expired. This is an interesting format. I kind of see where they're going with this. It's a little confusing. And then we have a thing that says blood recalled, and the table shifts in color to a red font. I think they're trying to indicate that the rest of the log is written in blood, that the lab pencil was forgotten. And more entities are forgotten, and then we have some blank lines, and vocalization, not applicable. And at the very end, we have an addendum. It says, research personnel were administered Class W monastic drugs. We're seeing a lot of these monastics this week. Just an interesting observation. But they were administered these drugs with the intent to examine SCP-4031. A deceased white male human emerged nude in the experimentation area. Subject possessed lacerations, skin discoloration, emaciation, hair loss, a broken left clavicle, and blood loss in the oral cavity. Notably, subject possessed significant cranial damage. And that's the entire article. This was short, but interesting, unsettling. But the format is very familiar. The format of the table bears a lot of resemblance to SCP-2719, which was it was an interesting linguistic skip that was described as an abstract metaphysical construct pointer. So perhaps it's not fair to connect the two just on the basis of they have a table with inputs on one side and outputs on the other. That's probably not fair to the work, because outside of that superficial resemblance, they actually don't have a lot in common. But nevertheless, the comments indicate along the same lines that that's something that a lot of people can't get over with this particular work. I think it is an interesting little skip. I think it is worthy of sticking around, and I liked it. Now, we'll go back to the beginning of this, the header that says the following file was found in Site 82. I'm maybe not getting the need for that. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to take it to mean that this is just a file that we found. We thought it was interesting that it's an SCP with an item number and presumably something that could be looked up in systems. We don't elaborate on this at all. I think that does this a disservice. There could be much more done just on that basis alone. And then you have the threat level of unknown and the special containment procedures of not applicable. Even if this was a file found in a site, I really have a hard time buying that we would build an entry in universe in this method. This stretches disbelief quite a bit. So there are some good things done, but there are some notable questions left about the construction of this skip and really why it is the way it is. Nevertheless, I am going to give this a +1 for the experimentation log. It does some really, it's really interesting, but you do have to actually pay attention to it and work through the mechanics of this input and result field. I think it is worth a read. I'm not going to go line by line through it. Worth a read to really get the full impact of this skip. Moving on, we have SCP-4543. This is at +26 in 2 days. It is an object class of Euclid with a full-width picture of a cemetery that has a lot of little white post-style headstones or monuments throughout it. The caption reads, "A graveyard with unusually high rates of SCP-4543. The containment procedures indicate that uncontained -1 instances are to be actively searched for and detained. Cemeteries within Quarry Park are to be monitored for unusual activity. MTF Zeta Public Eye is to monitor the actions of Seraph Manufacturing externally. Internal investigation efforts have been initiated, and civilian entry into Seraph headquarters is to be strictly prevented." Now, just to make things simpler for listeners that are fans of Deus Ex, we are referring to Seraph, SERAPH, as in angels, rather than SERIF, or font nerds, I suppose, in addition to the Deus Ex fans out there. We describe 4543 as a phenomenon wherein the bodies of deceased citizens, designated instances of -1, of Quarry Park, Calgary, will reanimate. We have a zombie skip from the sounds of it. Upon animation, -1 instances will exit their graves during the day through as of yet unobserved means and attempt to sell animal taxidermies and animal products door to door. Wow, not remotely where I thought we were going with that, but at approximately 6 to 8 p.m., -1 instances re-enter their graves and expire, leaving their graves the next day. So if I'm visualizing this correctly, we have zombies that rise from their graves during the day and become door-to-door salesmen. And then at the end of the business day, they go back to their graves. Really interesting concept. I want to see where we go from here. The rest of the description says that upon animation, the -1 instances will target certain houses. The criteria by which they determine the houses is unknown. They are known to avoid relatives and acquaintances, and these Dash 1 instances have an 89% close rate in their sales. If you've never done sales, much less door-to-door, that would be absolutely unheard of. The Dash 1 instances look exactly as they did in life, despite any level of decay pre-animation. That's an interesting visual, that they look exactly the way they did before they died. After the effects of 4543, Dash 1 instances present with altered personality, namely they exhibit narcissistic traits, are more prone to hostility, and are unwaveringly committed to their purpose of selling animal corpses. So this is very strange. We have this, some force must be reanimating these corpses to have them sell door-to-door taxidermy. That's really bizarre. We go into Addendum -1, which is an interview between a doctor and what I believe is a reanimated corpse, one of these Dash 1 instances. The interviewee is a little hostile, wants to see a lawyer. I've got a permit, I can sell stuff, I want to talk to a lawyer. And when asked why is he selling animal product, he replies, "It's my job." The interviewer asks, "Yes, but why taxidermies?" To which he responds, "Junk. The boss doesn't need them." And when we have the inevitable follow-up, who is the boss, the response is, less of a who, more of a what, and don't ask me what, all right? Really like where we're going here. This has a very throwback feel to some of the better qualities of Series 1. The interviewer goes on to ask why people are so interested in your taxidermied animals. Can't imagine the people of Quarry Park would be typically very interested in dead animals. The interviewee responds, "Listen here, I'll answer this and nothing else. Most people want a purpose, a job, if you will. The boss gave me my job. I come around and I give the people their job. They buy things, and the money goes to the boss. I've done my job. The boss doesn't fire me. The people are happy. Most of them. And those who decline? Junk. The boss doesn't need them." So, interesting, threatening little reaction from the interview log. It's a little unsettling. Then states that after the interview, that particular Dash 1 instance began rapidly decaying in containment, dying shortly after. This event later occurred to all other Dash 1 instances in containment. This event prompted an investigation into the graves of the Dash 1 instances, several of which yielded identical pamphlets, and the contents of these pamphlets have been logged below. And it appears to be a job ad from Serif, giving the opportunity for door-to-door sales. And it ends with Serif, you can rest easy, knowing that you'll be able to perform the work you were meant to. We then go into a series of interviews with people that had been confirmed to have bought these door-to-door taxidermies, and various people are questioned on why they're buying these products. The first person says, "I don't really know. My dad bought them every time they came around. I asked him why. He just told me my granddad bought them, so I figured I was supposed to. It's a good thing to do. Support the local economy, the arts and all. Maybe I don't get it and it looks kind of funny, but I'm helping out." The next one basically indicates that as far as they know, Serif is a charity. The interviewer indicates that our records don't show anything of the sort, to which the person replies, "Well, how accurate are your records? You should think twice before suggesting bad things about Serif. They do good work, and I'm proud to support them." So this is, got a really nice unsettling feel, of everything being a little too perfect in the neighborhood. I really like stuff that sort of tickles that particular nerve. We have a Dash 2 addendum, which is an investigation being conducted to determine the nature of Serif, and we have a video log which records a team of agents from MTF Zeta Public Eye being sent to investigate. We have two agents that are introduced as Maria King and Graham Gagnon. They are speaking with a secretary, and The secretary is sort of hostile, asks to see a warrant, and shows a warrant, and secretary says, now's not a good time. King says, we won't be causing any trouble, don't worry. And at this point in the video, a small portion of the secretary's face flakes off, revealing decayed skin underneath. And the secretary says, I'm terribly sorry, I can't let you in. And King says, we'll only be an hour or so, it's nothing too serious. Secretary says, no, I'm sorry, I can't. And at this point, the secretary's face disintegrates completely, leaving behind a necrotic layer of flesh. His eyes have vanished entirely. Gagnon says, hey pal, before we get a little too used to it, what the hell's going on with your face? The secretary says, please leave the building now. His forearm falls through his sleeve, and the secretary's unhappy with the situation. And at this point, the agents basically just force their way in, and the secretary goes to chase them, saying, you can't go inside, at which point his head promptly detaches from his neck. For being a video log, this is awesome. This is really creepy, escalates really well. We cut to the next part of the video log that is described as a series of operating tables. Entities can be seen gathering animal corpses from crates on their right, removing their hearts, and placing them in crates to their left. King quickly turns the camera left as a manager walks down the stairs, and his face is decayed, akin to the secretary's. King goes to introduce herself, and the manager says, I don't care who you are, get to the tables, get working. Gagnon replies, we don't work here, and the manager says, if the secretary lets you in, you work here. King says, understood. So they go down to an empty set of operating tables and crates, and they start playing along, kind of, sort of. Gagnon says, I'm not going to do this in their crazy scheme. The manager says, hey, you're wasting tissue. And the manager finds them, says they're slacking off. And at that point, Gagnon again says, we don't work here. The manager says, that's what I figured. And a swarm of humanoid creatures interview, dragging Gagnon out of the hallway. And King shouts out for him, and the manager says, if you can't do your job, then you're wasting our time. We're going to have to make use of you somehow. And the creatures bring him to the main operating area while King follows suit. They throw him onto a table and restrain him. King draws her gun, and Gagnon says, don't. King is silent. The creatures gather assorted surgical tools, and Gagnon says, you can't provoke them. You've got to go. And there's a moment of hesitation. He says, now. King hesitates before running for the exit, and the video feed cuts to black as a loud grunt is heard. End log. An examination of goods sold by Dash 1 instances in the following weeks revealed genetic material matching that of Agent Gagnon. Containment protocols have since been updated to forbid civilian access. End article. Really good, and this feels straight out of Series 1 in the best of ways. This is very creepy and unsettling, while not feeling like something that I've really seen before. I haven't seen it in quite this way. All of the elements have been done before in other skips, but the way that this is pulled together, and in particular the narrative that's built through the interviews and the story of the video log, is really compelling, and it's really fresh. If this thing had been written back during the 4chan days, or even in the first year or so, year or 2 years on Wikidot, this thing would be probably around 1,000 rating. I think this is absolutely outstanding. This is, if you are looking for that Series 1 feel, which we have a ton of new readers that's really what they know. They've seen all of the references to those old skips, and they like the nature of how those old ones work. This is very much in that vein, and I'm saying that, in the best possible light. One thing, maybe my favorite thing on this, is at the end of the video log, where Gagnon is basically being held down and knows full well what they are, presumably intending to do to him, and has almost immediately gone over to their side and says, don't provoke them, you should leave. That is an outstanding touch, and I think it is enough to, take this to that next level. This is a very easy +1 for me, and that looks to be the case for just about everybody. With +26, this is 28 up and 2 down. I really don't see much room to improve. This has so much to recommend for it. I would recommend this as maybe something I would show as one of the best examples I've seen of how to get that Series 1 feel in very late 2018. Moving on, we have SCP-4203. This is at +21 in a day. It has an object class of safe. We have an image of looks to be a middle-aged to elderly lady in a black and white photo. The eyes and most of the distinguishing features of the face are blacked out with a box, and it is captioned POI 4203. The containment procedures indicate that a generic warehouse is to encompass SCP-4203's exposed features and the building that it encompasses. Interesting wording. The exposed features of the skip and the building that it encompasses. So something larger than the building needs to have a building around it to hide it. Renovations to aging portions of the complex are to be cross-verified by personnel with clearance level 4 certifications, and field agents masquerading as security officers are to keep civilians away. Standard CCTV and surveillance cameras are to monitor incoming and outgoing traffic. The description says that SCP-4203 is the head of Alexandra Svoboda, hereby designated POI 4203. Wait a minute. So the SCP is the head of a lady, and the lady's head is larger than the building that it encompasses, and another building is built around it. Oh my god. Moving on, let's keep going. 4203 comprises 79% of the interiors in St. Ulstine's Asylum. Holy shit. We have a footnote here that the asylum is a former foundation front established in New York City for a twofold purpose of 1, detaining anomalous humans, and 2, experimentation with drugs, lobotomization, and electroshock treatment to pacify and control anomalous humans. And that by 1960, a new administration of O5s, now that's an interesting canonical excerpt all on its own, but we will leave that alone. A new administration of O5s voted to roll back and scrutinize global guidelines on medical procedures deemed arbitrary and inhumane by the Ethics Committee. And on-site personnel who were targeted for malpractice went on to become part of other GOIs such as Prometheus Labs or the GOC. Whew. We have a really... a really interesting visual here. SCP-4203 is comprised of flesh and bone. It is highly disfigured and resembles a self-portrait made by POI 4203. So we have the POI that is the lady and the SCP that is her head, and this head has somehow devoured the interior of an asylum, which has had a warehouse constructed around it to maintain the masquerade. This is really incredible from a visual standpoint. We go on in the description. An undulating cranial cleavage atop 4203 acts as the only entrance. Whew. Internally, 4203 is extraspatial and produces an environment and organisms with vibrant colors such as Prussian blue to neon pink to ultramarine. These organisms include flowers, grass, fungi, and trees. They possess no molecular composition when examined. We have a footnote for that says electron microscopes detect an assortment of colors in place of plant cells when viewing microbiology 10 to 20 microns in diameter. That's an interesting footnote. I mean, this whole thing is wild, but I am not a super deep science man. I don't know all there is to know about electron microscopes. It's interesting to have this wording that the microscope would detect colors in place of cells. I feel like that might need a little bit of rework to make more sense. These collective sets of organisms, the flowers, the grass, the fungi, the trees, are designated as -1 instances, and their vocalizations, ephemeral epidermis, avian-like bones, and hallucinogenic properties have remained unchanged since the POI's death. There is so much to take in these first 3 paragraphs. I cannot believe it. It is every piece of this, with the exception of this slightly off footnote 2, is necessary. There's almost nothing to cut from this, and that, I think, is it's actually rare. It's hard to do, to have it that cut and dry, but also still be really, really compelling. They've done an outstanding job walking that line here. We go on to say that Foundation field agents pacified and secured the POI after she exhibited low-level reality manipulation during a severe psychotic episode in 1923. She was sent to the asylum and improperly diagnosed with schizophrenia, and this was due to the Foundation's comprehension of mental disability, synonymous psychiatric conditions, and learning difficulties during the early 20th century. Interesting little note. I like building the Foundation canon in that way, that they have improved with time. In my head, they are, consistently a solid 80 to 100 years ahead of the rest of the world. So this is still believable on this timeline, given that while our understanding of mental health has certainly improved in the last 50 years, we have a long ways to go. We go on to say that posthumously, POI 4203 instances developed from her ability to create anomalous flora were redesignated to the -1 that we have now. And we have an initiative that was started by the Foundation to create a timeline for our interaction with reality benders, to in particular highlight outdated and or inefficient protocols to contain them, and this is all stored in RISA medical journals. What we have are a series of diary entries by the POI, and it starts out quite unsettling that she indicates that the scientists had indicated that she's to become a botanical thing that encircles others like me, and they removed a fragment of me to do so. Shame, that fragment held my first crush, the faces of my parents. Great prose here. And she says, it's not like I had a choice at this pawn shop of horrors, bargaining what meager self I still had for pills. The veracity of its cure and the effectiveness of its distraction have been lost on me for quite some while now. But so long as I can paint or write, and these little notes keep me stable, my little companions, I will endure, but to what end I do not know. These journal entries, diary entries as they're called in the skip, are really, really compelling. The next one indicates how distraught she is with the Foundation's assertion that they have misdiagnosed her of schizophrenia, that she considers schizophrenia her only world, and that she is totally lost at this point, that she's been confined for so many years and been experimented on, and all of these things that kept her going, that were her creative instruments, are, she cannot use them at this point. That she went from asylum to asylum, and nobody could ever help her stop the colors, and that even here in her head she can see them, purples, greens, golds, and reds, like phantasmal bouquets roaring up the hills. He was wrong, my doctor. They were all wrong about the abyss. Its antediluvian colors feel warm, and the kaleidoscope has a face and a truth. And I'm going to read this next little passage from the diary entry because it is, and I will likely be alone in this, but it has to do with my own personal sort of mental makeup and the things that really touch me and the things that I fear. This is, I think, the most brutally sad passage I have ever read on the wiki. It reads, Mr. Morrison started coughing blood today. Not long for this world, yet he lingers here, flapping his yellow-hewn feathers, meekly raising his greenish head for seeds, chirping and staring black-eyed, deep into the white cushions for walls. He is locked up in the cage, and wonders how long he's been here, or if this was a joke, some cruel mischief by a masturbatory god. He sometimes stares at the windows, thinking the walls possess mouths, so he just wants to focus on something other than chit-chat, and he stares at the windows. The mouths, it is not indiscriminate garble, and he gets the sense he is a genius for uncovering their secrets, often thinking himself the king of birds, or Thoth himself, because these strings of logic together tied so effortlessly that no other can see them. After all, the garden always starts off as a frenetic frenzy. His caretakers call it delusions of grandeur. He coughs up blood, and it comes out like a flower. He is dying, and he knows his coffin will be a shoebox somewhere in an unmarked warehouse, on the outskirts of some little unmarked town. He doesn't feel quite comfortable with the fact that he had discovered the vibrant truth of the world, and done absolutely nothing of note in life. He died, and as he thought in death, he prayed to Thanatos that it would end, but the walls only spoke on. End article. So, the last passage alone would earn my upvote. It is the most crushingly sad prose I think I've ever read on this site. But were it not for that, the rest of this work is absolutely tremendous. It is got so very much to like. It is this, surreal set of procedures and descriptions, and honestly, the thing is, it does all of this while still being quite short as a work. I'm blown away by this one. This is probably the easiest +1 of the day for me. This was the second entry of the week by Kindly Turtle Rock. This was a response to Bright's challenge, which is a very long-running challenge that Bright put down in the forums that says that the work must be written in one shot, in one sitting. And for this to have been built, this surreal, fantastic, terrifying, depressing universe to have been written in one sitting is absolutely humbling to me. Kindly Turtle Rock, please do not stop writing. You have an amazing gift, and I want to see you keep doing it. Phew. Okay, moving on. SCP-4135. This one is at +29 in a day. A little less than a day, I think. This went up late yesterday. And we have a object class of Keter and an image on the right side of what looks to be a duck with a white head and a black neck and a white torso. His wings are sort of out in front of him, and he's sitting in a pond. And the caption reads, an SCP-4135-B instance chasing -A shortly after being shot by machine gun fire. Not shot at by machine gun fire, shot by machine gun fire. This duck looks to be unscathed for its attempts. So we'll see where we're going here. The procedures indicate an MTF Phi 71 duck hunt. And this MTF is dedicated to the location and containment of -B instances that manifest. The International Mallard Location Index is designed to track the activity of any specific member of the species Anatidae. Anatidae is actually a family, not a species. It contains ducks, geese, and a number of related avians. But we'll come back to that. Containment of the -B instance is considered priority 1, and the containment of the -A instance is considered priority 7. Interesting. Once the -B instance is confirmed to be contained, the -A instance is to be administered amnestics and released into society. Currently, a -B instance is located within Site-55 in a biological anomalous entity chamber, and the chamber is reinforced with steel and is to be repaired upon signs of damage. Okay. Interesting. So I'm still not sure whether -B is the duck or -A is the duck, but we'll keep going. Once the current -A dies, the chamber is to be emptied of any duck viscera, and the new -A is to be located by Phi 71. So we've built up, as it stands right now, we have what I presume is a duck in a chamber reinforced with steel, and this steel has a non-zero chance of needing to be repaired due to damage inflicted by this duck. So let's keep on going. The description indicates that 4135 is a phenomenon that affects one random human on Earth, the -A, and it is observed through the spontaneous manifestation of any member of the Anatidae family. So they do use family correctly there. They have it half right in the work so far. The spontaneous manifestation of a member of the Anatidae family near the -A, and this will be the -B, who will then attempt to kill the human through any means necessary. -B instances are resistant to physical trauma and will quickly recover from most injuries dealt to them over a small period of time. So we have, I guess, what's normally a black duck or a goose or a swan spontaneously manifesting near the designated human and then attempts to attack them. If you've ever been around a goose or a swan that thinks you're encroaching on their territory, this might actually sound familiar, particularly the part that they're resistant to physical trauma. They are tough as nails. -B instances have been shown not to require food, water, or oxygen to survive and can survive an atomic blast. See attached document 73, Hiroshima and SCP-4135. I'm not sure how to feel about that inclusion. I'm not touching that. We'll keep going. When a -B instance is trapped, such as if it is in a container, it will bash its head against the walls of the container until the container breaks. So it is basically an indestructible duck or goose or what have you that can bash its head through steel given enough time. Once the current human dies, the duck will also die, and almost instantaneously, another random human on Earth will become the -A. The phenomenon usually targets people aged 18 to 35, but there have been cases of it targeting children and elderly people as well. And despite being virtually invulnerable, the -B instances are no more deadly than the average member of its species. And because of this, -A instances rarely die from -B and instead die of natural causes. So, I like the twist there. That we have this situation where we have these anomalously impervious ducks that can bash their heads eventually through steel and don't require food, water, or air, but when it comes down to it, aren't any more deadly than any other duck. That said, it is beyond the pale to include this Hiroshima reference. The thought that the Foundation would be behind such an act, particularly when the stakes are so low, puts this pretty definitively into some of the wackier elements of Series 1 that I think were largely past at this point. It's a poor inclusion. I think the article would be better served by almost any other reference. Even if I think all you would have to do to make that work would be to replace Hiroshima with Trinity or anything else out of the Manhattan Project, any of those tests, without bringing in such a horrific event as the Hiroshima bombing. It is not doing any favors to this entry. And so I am giving this a -1 for now. It's a small change. I think it would do a lot for the work, but I cannot, in good conscience, upvote it as it is right now. The premise, everything on it's okay. I feel like I can't endorse it outright in that way, the way that it's currently constructed. We have Japanese and Japanese American members on the site, some of them on site staff. This is not a good look. Moving on, we have our J. This is SCP-2718J. It is at +33 in a little under a day. We have an object class of Thaumiel, and we have a picture of what looks like a rather nice hotel room with a big king-size bed and some nicely arranged pillows and that little frickin' 2-foot wide blanket that they put on these beds for some reason. And the caption reads, Suite 2718J43, reserved for Dr. Liesl Naismith, not pictured, ant farm, stripper pole, automated massage frame, scented candles, and home theater. The procedures are that the portal to 2718J is to be kept at Area 2718 in a fortified containment bunker 50 kilometers under Mount Avsud, a mountain in Sweden. A cursory Googling tells me that this mountain does not actually exist. In the event of a pending K-class scenario, the bulkhead to 2718J is to be permanently sealed, and all containment staff are advised to cross their fingers. Due to limited resources available for the 2718J program, applicants for candidacy are to submit the following to O5 Command, and we have a set of bullet points including a cover letter, a urine sample of 500 milliliters, which is a lot, by the way, for drug testing, a 10-page essay, double-spaced, and 12-point Times New Roman on the subject of Why I Deserve a Nice Cozy Afterlife More Than Little Cindy Masterson, 7, of Madison, Wisconsin, who says her prayers every night and donated her birthday money to the Red Cross. No fewer than 3 works cited are to be included in MLA format. No sources are to be taken from Wikipedia. You also need $5 million in cash, 5 letters of recommendation from Level 4 Foundation personnel, a full CV including records of all donations, life achievements, random acts of kindness, and other relevant criteria, a receipt of a score of perfect or higher on the Naismith-Henderson Personnel Decency Placement Exam on the first try, 1 liter of desperate tears you've shed in the application process to demonstrate effort, the correct answers to the 3 riddles provided by an approved gremlin located in the director's office of each foundation site, and lastly, nudes. The estimated response time is approximately 2 to 3 years. Therefore, during the waiting period, applicants are advised to always look both ways before crossing the street. This is delightful. It goes on, that was the procedures. Getting into the description, 2718J, formerly known as SCP-2317, is a wooden door and frame that leads to an extra-dimensional salt flat, and following the presumed neutralization of SCP-2317K after a strongly worded letter, SCP-2718J has been used to build an extra-dimensional resort facility for the permanent containment and comfort of qualified dead bodies. So there's a lot to take in this little 2 or 3 sentence description that We have the portal that contained the Scarlet King in 2317, and that we have upgraded. That this is a J simply because we already had, we neutralized K. So we even have a reason that this is has a J appended to it. And we finally have our connection to the main lister. And it says that we have a link to SCP-2718, the main list, not the J, which, to refresh your memory, and it is very much worth the read, it's one of my very favorite works on the site, it is Object Class Damarung, and it is the report between the O5s that the feeling of death and the decision being made that death is an anomaly and must be contained. Really, really good article, and that is where we're springboarding off of into this J, and we will pick it back up that due to recent revelations about the afterlife, or lack thereof, the necessity of a means to create an artificial afterlife for self-aware corpses can no longer be ignored. 2718J known, and we have a footnote, depending on the structural integrity of individual eardrums, to patrons as the Damarung Resort Spa and Eternal Retirement Home, has been fitted with permanent residential accommodations for the deceased. So 2718, the main list entry, is absolutely terrifying with the picture that it paints of death, that your very molecules become aware and that you can feel yourself decaying, and it's a very, it's a properly horrifying picture that they paint, and our response to that is to build a resort and hotel to stick your dead body in. And if you go back to the top, it indicates that this particular suite included an ant farm and a stripper pole and a massage chair and scented candles and a home theater. The punchline being that you're dead and they're chucking your dead body into one of these suites. Currently, the 2718J houses 37 residents, a number that's expected to increase depending on the continued inevitability of death. So actually a nice little side reference there to the end of death canon as well. This is probably my favorite line in this article, is an addendum with testimonials, and it says, "No mouth, must scream, no problem." Here at Damarung, we're committed to providing you the time of your life in this world and the next. You will never feel uncomfortable for even a femtosecond, literally. To make sure your eternal stay with us is painless, we inject liquid Tylenol into your brain 5 times a day. We have a few more of these testimonials. One of them is a general from a particular initiative saying, "Just cremate me already, you sick fucks." And we have another one from the housekeeper that says, "When the Grim Reaper comes to call, come on down to Damarung, and they'll make me clean out your colon with a $1,000 German sponge. If Mr. Durnley sees even a single maggot egg in your skin, I have to go back in the punish box. Before I worked here, I was a Christian. Give us your money." Oh, Lord. This is, man, it is what it is. I've pretty much gone over all of it. For a J, I enjoy these that tie back to their respective main list entries and do so in a way that I wouldn't have seen coming. And I did not think there was a great way to take 2718, and again, I encourage you to read 2718 if you haven't, but to take it and make it funny. And that is exactly what they've done here. Now, the thing with J's, as always, is they have to check both sets of requirements. They have to do all the stuff that a main list skip does, and it has to be funny. This does both, and it passes with flying colors. This was a really entertaining little story. And that's about all I've got for SCPs, but there are 2 things that I also want to make mention of. One of them was the thing that I mentioned back at the very beginning of part 1. Nicolini wrote a fantastic essay for new writers. It is titled "Things What Do a Thing, an essay on anomalies that are things that do a thing." And it is a very admirable attempt to deconstruct 4 particular SCPs that do things, and that's their primary gimmick in the article, and deconstructs how they work, why they work, and goes into all the little things that people don't necessarily think about, particularly first-time writers that are trying to emulate the style without having the proper background in the motivations behind it. So this is worth a read, I think, even for experienced authors. This is, I believe, attached to the Guide Hub at this point. If not, keep an eye out for it, or you can search for it in the search the sidebar at the top of the wiki. But worth a read. It's always good to see how other successful writers go about their business, and just seeing their understanding of something gives you the ability to look at it in a new light and maybe give it some consideration that you hadn't previously done. And the second thing I want to draw attention to is an entry. I suppose we're going to call this a tale or an essay. It's somewhere in between, but it's titled Your Very First SCP, and we have a very cool looking what looks like an OS splash screen, and this is it goes into the image of somebody trying to build an entry, build an article on the wiki. And what we have is the introduction of the introduction of Skippy that I fear I'm going to be dating myself here. I know how old I am compared to most of the readership, that they may have seen Clippy in the Microsoft Office products of the 90s as a joke, but it really existed. They really pushed this for a while. So we have this introduction of Skippy, the automated SCP helper. And as you go, line by line, little section by section through this essay, there are many links to all of our best guides. There's explanations on why we do things a certain way. It goes into object classes. It goes into the proper formatting. It goes into things like the locked box test, which isn't official, but for the purposes of a first-time writer, it's definitely something you need to know about before attempting those esoteric classes. They make mention of neutralized and explained skips, and what I'm amused by this, because as you keep going, Skippy will occasionally sort of lose his cool and say, trying to get him to stick to the format. And but at the same time, while this is, it's entertaining for experienced authors and readers, this could be incredibly helpful to new authors. I would strongly suggest that we do something along these lines from an actual staff perspective. This was a fairly labor-intensive effort by the Great Hippo, and I really admire the amount of work put into this for, being an essay or being something that's not going to typically get all that highly rated. Now, in this case, this is at plus 142 in a day. That is an indication of both how good this is and how much effort went into this, and that effort's being rewarded with the only way that we really can with these positive votes. I strongly suggest you give it a read. It's really entertaining, and the fact of the matter is, this is a sort of a good roundabout way to provide some indirect critique for our newest authors. And I want to be clear, if you are listening to this podcast, if you are so into this universe that you're consuming it in these alternative methods like a podcast, and you just want to, absorb as much of it as you can, and you want to see the place grow, you should be doing everything you can to help new writers. We have an absolute shortage of people that are willing to provide critique, both in the forums and in the comments after they're posted to the main list. Now, I run deletions usually Monday through Friday in around noon my time, and it is honestly pretty sad the number of deletions that I'll process that I have no feedback to port. And I'm not talking stuff that was borderline and it wasn't really worth a mention, or they very clearly saw it and made the changes that were suggested. I'm talking things that didn't get any comments at all, except the staff post for the deletion vote, the second and the third. We have 3 comments for the entire work. That's not fair to our new writers. The staff cannot do this on their own. We are simply outnumbered. So if you have an interest in seeing the place continue to grow and do well, please consider this something in the vein of a civic duty. We can't make you guys do anything along those lines, but it would absolutely help everybody involved out. Provide that crit, even if it's just, once a week, going in for 15 or 20 minutes. There are workshops available. There are so many resources available for becoming the teacher, becoming the resource that can really help somebody. And we can be honest, not all of the people that come to write are going to ever write something that sticks on the site for any number of reasons. But that does not give us any right to ignore them entirely, even if it's just pointing them to resources for if they are interested enough to jump through the hoops, to make an account, to wait 4 or 5 days, to build a sandbox, to post an entry, then the least we can do is acknowledge the effort they're putting in and to point out, hey, you're a ways off right now, but luckily for you, you're posting this in 2018. And we have so many resources available now that can educate you on every single facet of what we do. So if it's at all within your capability to make a little time for this, certainly consider it. Critique is the cornerstone of this website. We are a collaborative writing project, and the collaborative piece is the single most important factor of all of it. And with that said, I'm going to get off my soapbox. I thank you all very much for listening to this week 52 recap. I am undecided yet on whether I'm going to cover a best of podcast for 2018 and go over the top 10 articles of the year. I shouldn't say that I'm on the fence. It's more that I'm not sure when exactly I'm going to be able to do it. But that is going to happen sometime within the next couple of weeks, even if it maybe spills into early 2019. That won't be the end of the world. But regardless, Week 1 podcast for 2019 will be available next Friday. We'll also be kicking off the Cliché Con on January 1st. That is next Tuesday. So if I don't talk to you between now and then, have a wonderful new year, be safe, and we'll be back next week.